my dad was an old-time musician, played fiddle, and I guess both my grandpas were old-time musicians, played banjos, and just something I've always been interested in, and it's also sort of way of life around this area too. You know, everybody, you know, almost still like it is. It's not too well-to-do a place, and the cheapest and best form of entertainment was to get together and play music. And that's something that still goes on. I think that'll work. Takes me probably, I guess, a couple of weeks or something to make one like this. Maybe shorter if I concentrated on one instrument and just kept busy at one thing. And I worked pretty long days doing that. I worked later in the night, and during the daytime I have usually lots of phone calls and company, and get most of my work done at the nighttime. I start out with a board like this one right here, like this mahogany board. It's so thick. I take it to this big old saw. It's got junk all over it, but I clean it off when I'm going to use it, and just resaw it into pieces somewhat this thick, and the thickness of this right here, which is about 3/32. Something like that. Then I take it over on the other side of the shop and sand it run it through this sander. And when I first started making guitars back in the 60s, I used to take a piece of window glass and get it down on the floor and scrape it. I would spend days to get a piece of wood down thin enough to do that. Now I've got a nice sander I can run it through in a few minutes and do it. Then I put it in just a pot of water here. This one still got some water in it where I was bending something the other day. And you just turn the hot plate on and you cook it like you was cooking your supper, beans or something. And cook it for about 15 minutes. And then that piece of wood it's still straight, but it's wet and hot and soaked through. And you put it in this homemade contraption. It's real. I used to bend them just over a piece of hot piping, and with a torch running through it or something to get it hot. But some fella out in California, I think, invented this thing. And it's really a neat trick. You can put different shapes of guitars. You can see that's shaped like half this guitar I just built there. When you get this done, I take it and put it in a form. I'll show you. You can walk right over here. I put it in this this is an old form I've had for years, and it's just made out of a piece of chipboard or plywood, and then you clamp those sides in here with this spreader and clip the ends of them off. And when you spread this thing out, it forces it out against this form, and that gets it the right shape. Next thing you do is start making a top and back. Like here's a top and a back I have ready to go on this guitar right here. And put the braces on. And the back of a guitar has to have an arch built in it, and especially the back, because to deal with humidity changes. The wood, over the years I've learned this stuff, most all of it the hard way, because, I thought the back of a guitar was flat and I'd make them, and in the wintertime you notice them start sinking in and humidity leaves and the wood shrinks. And then next thing you know, you've got a crack or it pulls the joint apart. This is bad stuff to happen, but if there's a little bit of arch built in them, it gives them a little bit of leeway to shrink so much, and that kind of stuff is was always the hardest to learn, and you have to do it by some of your guitars blowing up and cracking or getting cracks in them, and you have to fix them. And then you discover what causes it, and then you can build in things to prevent it, you know. And if you look at the old ones, they already knew that 100 years ago, you know, and figured that kind of stuff out. It's just the box. I'm doing repair work on it. And this was made in, I think, in 1968. And it's had been through an awful lot of abuse. You know, it's been played out, and somebody glued some kind of big square bridge and ripped it off and brought top and all. And I think somebody left-handed has played it, and for years without a pick guard, you know, because it's got the wire over here on the opposite side where it would normally, you know, if it'd been made left-handed, I'd have had a pick guard over there. But this stuff, all these inlays were cut and with a file and that kind of thing, and all the channels and was where you run around it with a router. This was all done with a pocket knife. All these inlays around here, and this is made out of a nice piece of rosewood, and it has a bullet hole in it. I don't know how it got that. Well, this I think some pretty rough people had this guitar at one time. A bunch of moonshiners that lived over the other side of Galax somewhere, and I don't know what happened, where that was in some kind of I hope nobody was playing it when that got shot like that, but they might have. I think somebody said they might have set it up and thought if they could shoot through the sound hole, it wouldn't hurt it. Thing that didn't know any better. Here's one that I made, I think, when I was 10 years old, or something like that. And I think I've had to put a new box on it time, because I think the date on that box is 59, looks like, maybe. And got a mouse hole in it and that sort of thing. But I used to play a tune on it a little bit when I get that thing set down there. But anyway, here's that first one. And like these little pieces around here, I whittled out each one of those individually with a pocket knife. And I wouldn't have any idea how long it took me to do that. Every guitar I've ever made just had the neck carved with a pocket knife, you know. This whittling stuff is my therapy. When I'm tense and everything, I can totally relax to sit down, and by the time I get a guitar or mandolin neck carved out. That's my favorite thing to do. People are always asking me, you know, how do you make these guitars? And I always usually tell them the same thing. You get some nice mahogany like this, and spruce and ebony, and for the fingerboard bridges and that kind of thing, and a good sharp whittling knife, and cut off everything that does not look like a guitar. And you can look around the floor here and see all kinds of things that don't look like guitars, you know.
Wayne Henderson epitomizes the heart, intelligence, wisdom, soul, and spirit of the mountain people in Virginia. He's a famous, talented artist, has 6 CD recordings released, a National Heritage Award winner, who has played in more countries representing the United States than we can count. A well-traveled, brilliantly talented, humble man who loves his art, life, and those who surround him, which really adds up to his music.
be all right. You have to